Welcome in on a Friday morning, everyone. 3304 Daily here. Dan Steinbach is your host today. I'm joined, of course, by our producer, Ryan Wilkes. And in our third chair today, we've got Nels Williams co hosting, as well as being our screener. All right. So we're going to go a little bit around the horn today with a lot of different topics. And we want to start off here. We want to start with the College Football National Championship that just happened. And, last week, if you guys were here with us, we were breaking down the game. We were talking about who was going to win. I thought Alabama was going to cruise. Ryan, kudos to him, picked the Bulldogs to win. So here comes my question on, what I think that game meant. And I think when we talk about that game, I really think we have to talk about what happened in the playoffs overall. But what I saw when I watched that game is just two teams on a completely different level from the rest of the sport. And look, it's no secret that, the SEC has dominated the national championship in, recent years. But I really don't know what else we want to expect. So let's take a team like Virginia Tech, for example. Virginia Tech and the ACC as a whole, albeit Clemson for a couple of years there. But unless Virginia Tech starts to recruit on that level, I know Brent probably had a really nice press conference yesterday where he talked about recruiting, he talked about footprint, but overall, Virginia Tech probably won't end up with classes with, multiple 5 stars, 15 plus 4 stars like Georgia and Alabama and Texas A&M. Until they start, recruiting on that level, I think that national championship conversation just gets thrown out the window. And that's not just for Virginia Tech. At this point, that's for 99% of college football teams. I don't know, man. I don't know what the answer to it is, but I think if you want to be a happier fan, no matter if you're a Virginia Tech fan or anywhere in between, I think talking about contending for conference titles can become a benchmark for certain staffs. But if you start to hold coaches accountable to making their teams nationally relevant, I think that's a really slippery slope. I come from the state of Michigan. That's where I'm recording today, and Michigan football just had their most successful season in probably 2 decades. They actually won the Big Ten for the first time since '04. They beat Ohio State, which is a rarity for them. But after the drubbing by Georgia in the semifinal, I've got people talking about how is that really all you want this season to be? You just want to be a national doormat and win conference titles. Is that not a bad thing? Or is that a bad thing, really, at the end of the day? Does Michigan need to become Alabama in order to be successful? I don't know, because if you do that, then it's just then every program that isn't Alabama is going to be firing their coach every 3 years, which I think just becomes toxic, for one. And I just don't think we need to see college football go in a direction. So, gentlemen, I want to welcome you in and kind of want to get your thoughts on that. What are your thoughts on the game? And what can we do to really, I don't know, fix the game of college football? That's something I've been hearing, that college football needs to get fixed. Does it really need to get fixed? And what can be done about all this?
Honestly, with the recruiting point, even before NIL, it was not something that you could flip the switch on. It's not like you can't just be like, oh yeah, we need to recruit 4 and 5 star guys. It doesn't work like that. I mean, obviously you want the big fish, but there's schools out there that already have that credibility where players want to go play for that school, and you're going to have to do a heck of a recruiting job in order to get them to come to your school. And now with the NIL stuff coming in, it puts a whole other wrench in the situation. Um, my thoughts on the game. I thought it was a great game. I thought it was one of the better national championship games that we've seen in the era of the college football playoff. And, good mix of defense and offense. Obviously, it looked like it was going to be a real low scoring game early on. We only saw field goals. Um, but it just showed how big the talent gap is. And I think the biggest thing, honestly, is I think expansion of the college football playoff creates more meaningful games. I think that will cut back on the opt outs. Obviously, there's a lot of opt outs even in big New Year's Six bowl games. Um, Players opting out, and because at the end of the day, that's a bragging rights game. You want to win that game, but it's at the end of the day, it's for bragging rights mainly. Um, so I think with an expansion of the college football playoff and having that opportunity to compete in the national championship, there's a couple upsets here and there. I think that creates situations for teams like Ole Miss. Obviously Matt Corral didn't opt out, but in a situation where he did, that would be a game where a top player like that would want to play that game, right? So I think that in that situation, expansion would be good. But at the end of the day, do I think it, creates avenue for a new national champion? Or, we saw Cincinnati, the number 4 ranked team in the country, how big the talent gap was there, just between the number 1 and the number 4 team in the country. So obviously there's a huge talent gap there. And, it's hard to say exactly what needs to change, because recruiting is not something you can just, Cincinnati can't just say, oh, we're going to focus more on the 4 and 5-star guys and start pulling them like Alabama and Georgia. It just doesn't work like that. So it's going to take quite a while for recruiting to really, take a turn, if it does.
Yeah, what it really boils down to is the fact that college football had college football had one of the best regular seasons of all time, in my opinion, this year. There's upsets everywhere. Purdue upsetting Michigan State, Virginia Tech upsetting UNC in the first game. But the fact that it was such a marvelous regular season, it came out of the wire. There were a lot of good storylines in terms of Michigan versus Ohio State. The fact that we had such a great regular season and it's still funneled down to Georgia versus Alabama in the national championship is the problem that I have. College football right now is the problem where the regular season games are really exciting. It's anything goes. Almost any game is a trap game. Upsets, it's upset alert every minute on ESPN. But as soon as the bowl season hits, players are opting out, which I fully support. I fully support players opting out. And you have these 2 games that are hyped up for weeks on end. Yet they still come out to where Alabama beat Cincinnati easily, and Michigan versus Georgia is a snooze fest. And then you come down to the national championship between 2 SEC teams. Was this a better national championship than before? Absolutely. It was anyone's game until the third quarter, fourth quarter. But just the fact that we still got there really just goes to show that something needs to change. And I think that what needs to change is the expansion of the playoffs. It should most likely be 8 to 12 teams, as well as making some of the bigger bowls, obviously the Rose Bowl, Cotton Bowl, Sugar Bowl, those larger games, but having like the Fiesta Bowl and other bowls that are still kind of relevant and play good teams, but aren't the classic blue blood kind of bowls per se, should be the ones for the rounds before the national championship. As you mentioned, Ryan, the NIL deals and just college recruiting, you can only go so far with that. And I think it will take time for it to pick up. But this also just goes to show that the SEC is just a step above every single other college football conference in the Power 5. So
I like that you guys are bringing up the expansion, and that's the hope, that expansion can breed, new title contenders. I mean, the hope for me that I hold out on is, okay, we get all these new teams in, and now instead of having only 4 teams that can pitch, hey, we can make it to the playoff, we can make it to the national title. Now, hopefully you can have those blue chip prospects hear from more teams, more schools, and say, hey, they expanded the playoffs, now we have a shot, come, stay home if they're from out of state, stay home, build something here, and we can make a national title run rather than only, 3 teams having a realistic shot at one. But that comes the problem too. We all know it. Most of the homegrown talent, most of the blue chip prospects in high school football are in the South. And so they want to stay in the South. They want to stay in the SEC. That means they go to football factories like Bama, like Georgia. And I really don't know if there's a way to change that. So I think a good way to just make college football a more healthy experience for a lot of people, it sounds crazy, but maybe just lay off on national championship talk unless you have a team that can really do something special. But let's just say like a guy like Brent Pry, first-time head coach, coming back to Virginia Tech to rebuild something, I think it's in the best interest of the fan base to just be like, hey, let's build something here. At some point, definitely want to compete for some conference titles. But if it's, year 8 and he's won you an ACC and he wins you a couple coastals here or there and he gets you to New Year's 6 games and has you in big games, I don't think it's, necessary to hold his feet to the fire and say, oh, he hasn't won a national championship, he's not Dabo. Not everyone has to be Dabo. All right. I think it's time to move on. If you guys have any thoughts on that, hit us up in the YouTube live chat, as well as Text us at 540-216-2231. That is the 3304 Daily Hotline. All right, let's move on here. Let's talk a little bit of Virginia Tech basketball, both men's and women's. And just an update for anyone listening to us who has plans on attending the Notre Dame game at Cassell Coliseum tomorrow. Virginia Tech has released new COVID rules. For students, you just have to show a passport because, I mean, if you're a student, you're already vaccinated. You're likely already cleared on that end. But you do have to show proof of vaccination if you aren't a student. I'm very interested to see how this goes over. I'm very interested to see how attendance goes. I won't be back in Blacksburg until Monday, so I'm not going to be able to, see how it goes. Hopefully, we can see on TV if attendance is shaken up here. What's that? All right, Nels is telling me he's got a call. All right, guys. Just wanted to do a quick update. Sorry, we can't take your calls right now. We're still figuring out the system. Again, this is just a test stream. Whoever you are, please, without a doubt, text the same number you just called, and give us your thoughts on national championship. Appreciate you for listening. We'll definitely get your message in. We'll have Nels read it live when he gets it. If you have thoughts on the state of college football, definitely want to hear from you. So thank you so much. But yeah, we can't do calls right now, guys. We'll figure that out in due time. Don't worry about that. But once again, thanks for texting in. All right. So here we go. Let's talk a little bit of Virginia Tech basketball. Let's start on the men's side because it's just another loss to an ACC team. They have started out 0-4, and you can definitely tell that this fan base is restless because I'm seeing a lot of social media reaction, and it's getting a little dicey, no doubt. Man, all the reactions that I'm seeing, talking about Mike Young and this and that. Here's the thing: when you look at the start of the season, I think that we all were very high on the talent that they had. And at this point now, I think it's rather than the fact of saying, oh, these players just aren't talented, I think that we all understand that they are just not performing to the level we know that they can. It's not a fact of, it's not the fact that, when you look at their high school recruiting numbers, Kelly Luma was mostly unwanted and then he transferred from Wofford. Storm Murphy, a Wofford transfer. Justin Mutz, a Delaware transfer. And Naheem Aline and Hunter Couture. Let me pull up their recruiting numbers here. Both 3-star players. I don't think that's necessarily the thing because we've seen these guys play in ACC play. We've seen them play in big games in conference. I don't think necessarily these players are not ACC players. I think when you take a look at the transfers out of the program, guys that were big contributors last season, and then not just being able to fill those roles this year, I think that comes into the roster management. I don't think it's necessarily a fact of, oh, we don't have ACC players on this roster. Because I think you do. I think that the way that Mike Young has constructed this roster, focusing a little bit more on transfers for starting roles. Losing guys like Joe Bamisile, Tyrese Radford, Joe Bamisile, a 4-star prospect, highly valued, doing well at George Washington. If you want to talk about that, sure. If you want to just talk about the fact that, nationally and in the ACC, the recruiting rankings aren't up to par, that's fine. But at the same time, I still think Mike Young has found guys that can give you value. And moving forward, we'll see how roster construction goes forward. But I don't know. I think that this is just a lot of instant reaction. A lot of people were high on this team. I mean, myself included. It's definitely hard to watch a team that we know could do something special. Continue to, and hopefully continue to build on that. It's just not happening this year. This team, at this point, you're very unlikely that they make the NCAA tournament. I don't even know if they're on the bubble anymore. But, I mean, just look forward to next year. Look at the next class. You got Rodney Rice, MJ Collins, and Patrick Wessler, all 3 guys, I would say highly touted recruits. I'm seeing a lot of, good things from recruiting sites. And overall, Mike Young brought Mike Jones on staff. And Mike Jones is known as a guy that can get you in with some more highly touted recruits, more blue chip prospects. So if recruiting is the main concern with a lot of people, making up talent deficits and whatnot, that's fine. But I think we got to give Mike Young a little bit more time here. I think this just comes down to a simple fact of they're losing games because, quite frankly, players just aren't playing up to their potential. And at some point, I don't know how a coach can, really alter that at this point in the season. It's definitely something to look at, but I don't think we're without it. I don't think we're on the fire Mike Young train yet. I think that's outlandish.
My big thing with this team, just watching Virginia Tech play, there's one gaping hole that I think Tyrese Radford filled that, and I think the loss of Tyrese Radford was a bit downplayed. Tyrese Radford could really get to the rim and really get you some free throw attempts and get to the line. And Virginia Tech shot 3 free throws against Virginia, 3 compared to Virginia's 16 attempts. That is something that needs to be fixed, and all 3 came from Keve Aluma. So this is something that the Hokies have been missing all year. They haven't had a guy that can go downhill and get a bucket late in the game. And watching that game, you could see that. They went scoreless in the last 3 minutes of the basketball game, which allowed Virginia to make a little run there at the end and push ahead. But a couple other notes in this game. Virginia Tech held arguably Virginia's best player, Jaden Gardner, to 4 points. That was compensated by Francisco Cafaro's 16 points, a guy that averaged 4 points a game. Came in and probably played the game of his career against Virginia Tech. So those are a couple things I noticed watching this game. And I think that's what the Hokies have been missing. And a couple other notes, Darius Maddox only playing 8 minutes. That's a guy that can give you an immediate scoring punch off the bench. And he might have not gotten the run that some Hokie fans maybe expected out of him in this game. Another tough loss in the ACC. Again, Dan, like you said, 0-4 in the ACC. Running out of quality games to add to the tournament resume for the Hokies. So maybe not a tournament season this year. But again, like you said, Mike Jones can recruit the DMV. That's what they brought him in to do. Rodney Rice, obviously one of the most highly touted point guards in the DMV. Both him and Patrick Wessler were All-American nominees. So those are 2 guys, and MJ Collins coming in, 3 guys that you got that are really capable basketball players. And I think, like you said, some people are having some irrational takes. I think losing to a rival is never easy, and some of that frustration's been built up this season. A couple winnable games here early in the season against Wake Forest and NC State both didn't go the Hokies' way. So I think there's a lot of pent-up frustration, but saying Mike Young needs to go this early in his tenure is a little bit outlandish, and I think the Hokies will figure it out in the upcoming seasons.
One of the biggest things about how this losing streak is gone is just the fact that both of these games have been close. The loss to NC State Wolfpack was 68-63, and the loss to Virginia was just by 2 points. And the thing is that UVA played a very poor game. They shot 23% from 3 and 40% from the field goal range. Like that, to any other team, that's an absolute blessing. But to Virginia Tech, they, like you said, with the loss of Radford, they just haven't been able to really find that guy to really drive into the paint and put it up and draw the foul. I noticed it when I was watching Duke as well in the last 5-10 minutes. Virginia Tech allowed, I believe, a 10-0, 12-0 run to Duke. They came out of the second half really sloppy. And instead of just driving the paint and just going into the rim and just hopefully drawing a foul, they were just prancing around it. And it seems as if though they were just going for the 3 ball instead of going for the long 2, which is not a healthy way of playing basketball and won't really get you anywhere. So I just think that the loss of Radford and just this whole, like you mentioned, Ryan, is really something that's coming back to haunt the Hokies. They're going to have to do a lot. They have to win against Notre Dame on Saturday. Otherwise, that's 4 straight losses. And that's really the time to sound the alarms and say, okay, what's going on here if they haven't already, which obviously I hope they have. But it's just not been the year that everyone was hoping that it would be. And to some people, that's major disappointment, and me included. So I really don't know what they can have to do. Hopefully Maddox gets going off the bench, but I think that if they lose Notre Dame, then it's definitely time to start saying, okay, let's look towards next season. We're probably not going to make the tournament unless we have an absolute miracle run. And I think it's time to let the bench guys play a little more. I'd love to see Maddox get more minutes. That's one thing I definitely want to see from Mike Young, but he absolutely should not be fired. And next season will hopefully be a lot better than this one come the result from what happens tomorrow on Saturday against Notre Dame.
Yeah, hopefully they can pick up a win somewhere down the line. All right, we're up against it. Unfortunately, only an hour show. I would love to be able to, talk women's, all I'll say is this: is that Elizabeth Kitley continues to dominate. Another win over Duke, another convincing win over Duke. This time on the road. So shout out to the women's team. They're playing great. That UNC loss was a little, attention catching. Seeing them lose like that. But still no worries about them. And Kenny Brooks, I think, got win number 450. I didn't realize he'd been coaching that long, but all those years at James Madison definitely added to that total. All right, here we go. Moving on now. We're going to talk a lot of NFL today. We're going to take a break around the bottom of the hour, and then we're going to basically have the second half of today's show be all NFL playoff talk. So let's get into it. And I really have a question, for the both of you here, and maybe for the listeners here. We've got all these head coaching jobs opening up in the NFL coaching carousel. It's basically, I did not realize that the average number of head coaching positions open was about 7 or 8, and that's where we are right now. So a quarter of the NFL does not have a full-time answer at head coach at the moment. And I'm going to run through the jobs, and I'm going to give you guys my thoughts, and then we're going to go into a little bit of a discussion here about which open job we think is the best. So here we go. So I'm looking here at Adam Schefter. This is a tweet from the 11th, so basically right after Week 18, and then he added to it yesterday after what I think would be a surprise firing, but maybe not if you were looking at the situation closely. All right, so the New York Giants, they have got rid of both their head coach and their general manager. The Bears have also fired both their head coach and general manager, as have the Vikings. And these 4 teams, the Broncos, Dolphins, Jaguars, and Raiders, and then the Texans yesterday, have all fired their head coach. No word as of yet on the general managers of those teams. So when you look at those situations, when you look at the divisions they play in, their roster construction, cap space, all that, what job do we really think is the best opening? And I'm gonna give you an answer, and I think this might be a popular one, despite the fact that they play in a very tough division. I'm gonna go Broncos. I think the Broncos, they're in a good spot roster-wise. Now, it really comes down to this offseason. They got to throw whatever they can to get Aaron Rodgers, because that receiving room, that running back room, they got a decent offensive line. They've got pieces on defense. I think they can add more in this offseason, definitely on the defensive end. But, I mean, overall, just get a guy that was better than Vic Fangio. I think that he, struggled there because I don't think he really had an answer at quarterback. The Drew Lock experiment failed. Teddy Bridgewater was there for a hot minute. And then this year, flipping between Lock and, whoever else they were having. It was just a tough time for the Broncos in the quarterback department. But Aaron Rodgers seems to be a guy that has a lot of links there. It could be a solution to where he wants to go. He might end up staying in Green Bay if this postseason goes well. But if this is truly the end of it, go out, get that quarterback. I know that they play in the toughest division in football. You've got Kansas City, you've got the Chargers, get the Raiders, who made the playoffs despite all the adversity that they've gone through. It's a tough division. But that roster is just so good that if you can insert a head coach and you got to get the quarterback, that to me, that becomes probably the best job opening right now. Other than that, I could lean the Bears only because of the division and the fact you have Justin Fields. You got to get the head coaching hire here right. Same thing with the Jaguars. You got to make sure that Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence have the guy that can get them right. The Bears, they got to get the GM as well. They got to, make sure that roster ends up looking better. But the NFC North, again, if Aaron Rodgers leaves, the NFC North could become wide open for years. The Vikings are going to have to go through a rebuild soon. Their roster's aging. The Lions could get really good really fast, but we got to hold out and see what Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell do there. I think the Bears have an interesting point to be made here for the best head coaching opening. I'm interested in your guys' thoughts. I'm going to go with the Broncos at number 1. With that, they have a really good roster, and they really got held back by bad quarterback play this year.
So it's very interesting. I think the Broncos are on my top 3 as well, but my number 1 is going to stay in the NFC North, and it's not Chicago. It's Minnesota. The Vikings this year easily could have walked into the playoffs. They have Jefferson, Cousins, and Cook. Those 3 guys on offense are a deadly top 3 if Kirk Cousins can get it going and he plays at 1 o'clock on a Sunday. However, Mike Zimmer just didn't coach them properly. They had a lot of games where it just came down to just poor coaching from Zimmer. So if you're coaching the offseason and you look at the Vikings, I'm thinking, okay, if I go here 2, 3, 4 years, then I'm going to turn this team into a playoff contender. Or number two, I'm saving NFC North, and I'm saving Chicago. If I'm a coach, I'm looking at Chicago and I'm saying, okay, Justin Fields, he's put up significantly better numbers than Trevor Lawrence, and the Bears have more to build around than the Jaguars do. Let's see what I can do with him. But that's a very interesting and costly experiment to play out because Lawrence is more highly touted, or excuse me, was more highly touted than Fields coming into the season. But at number three, I got to go with the Broncos as well. The Broncos, if they had a stable quarterback, easily could have been a playoff contender as well, although they are in the hardest division in the NFL. So I think that the safest choice, if you're a coach right now, is the Vikings. And one team that I would just not want to touch at all is the Giants. The Giants are just befuddled, and there's just so much just mismanagement and everything going wrong in New York. I would not want to touch it with a 10-foot pole unless they absolutely have to, unless they throw a lot of money my way. So I'm going Vikings, then Bears, and then Broncos for the three coaching positions that I would choose in a heartbeat.
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna pick a different one than you both did. I'm gonna go with the Las Vegas Raiders. I think this is a very attractive job. Obviously, early in the season, quite possibly the craziest and worst situation for anybody on that team to be involved in. You had an inglorious exit by John Gruden, and the Henry Ruggs situation, obviously not ideal. But arguably, you have the best quarterback out of any position coming open with Derek Carr, a guy that has been through it all and willed this team to the playoffs. You've got weapons like Darren Waller, Zay Jones as well. I think this is an attractive job. A new stadium, this is obviously a team that can make the playoffs. And if you're a coach, I think this is an attractive job to come into. Maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, we're talking about a different story, but the Raiders figured it out and they made the playoffs. So Derek Carr's in his final year of a 5-year deal. So that's something to watch out for. But you've also got guys on the defensive end like Max Crosby, a really exciting defensive player. So I think this Las Vegas job is very attractive, and it could draw a lot of people in. But again, the Broncos are a great choice as well. I think that's a very attractive opening. But to me, Las Vegas, you can't ask for more. Obviously, a team that, fought really hard to get to the playoffs after fighting pretty much everything imaginable thrown at them. Derek Carr showed a lot of resilience, and he's obviously a guy I think you'd want in a franchise where you're coming in as a new head coach. So I think the Las Vegas Raiders are my most interesting and optimistic opening for this year.
I do want to just get a little bit of news out here. Virginia Tech has released their compensation for assistant coaching pool, and I find this very interesting. Tyler Bowen, of course, has been officially named offense coordinator. We were talking about him a little bit last week as speculation. He's going to be making $850,000. Chris Marve, the defensive coordinator, will be making $825,000. And then the highest paid assistant by far is Joe Rudolph, who they, of course, stole from Wisconsin. He's going to be making $725,000. So just an offensive line coach making nearly as much as a coordinator. I mean, that's big boy stuff. And that's definitely seeing them being able to expand the assistant coaching pool to be able to get a guy like him, as well as save some money on some other hires. Very, very impressed with that. And obviously the Joe Rudolph hire is probably my favorite one of them all so far. But getting back to this, I really think those are the building blocks for what you're talking about here. What's your division look like, and what does your offseason capital look like? There's a chart that I'm looking for that someone made yesterday that I saw someone, some guy. He did a really good job at showing who had a good season this year and then who also has a good amount of off-season capital. I think this is a pretty good chart here. And when you look at opening jobs, I think that is something to take into consideration. Like right now, if you look at it, the Jaguars definitely out of this group of teams without a head coach, they have the most flexibility because they have decent amount of cap space. They have the third most in the league, coming up behind Miami and the Chargers. And then they also have a lot of capital, a lot of draft capital, probably in that top 5 area when it comes to draft picks. So I don't know, with such a bad situation with Urban Meyer, and then you get Travis Etienne into the mix next season, could you guys see Jacksonville turn it around here?
I mean, honestly, I hope they do. I feel awful for the fans of Jacksonville for them to go from making the AFC Championship with Blake Bortles and the Saxonville defense just to the clown show that the fans have labeled it, just going on right now. Trevor Lawrence, I don't really know what's wrong with him. A lot of people blamed his poor start on the Urban Meyer fiasco, but he hasn't really looked that great ever since he's been fired. But I think the pieces are there. Obviously, they have Marvin Jones Jr. And DJ Chark on offense, along with Travis Etienne and James Robinson at running back. So the offensive pieces are there. But I think that going into this draft, as long as they get the right guys, then the ship could be turning in towards the right direction in the future. But it all comes down to Trevor Lawrence's shoulders. You know, he was highly touted out of Clemson. Obviously, we all know about T-Law, but it's just whether or not he can produce in the NFL level. The same comparisons are made to Zach Wilson at the Jets and how, you know, both of them started off rocky, except for the fact that Wilson really stepped up his game in the second half and the later portion of the NFL regular season. So the Jaguars can turn it around, but it all just depends on who they draft on the defensive side of the ball and whether or not Trevor Lawrence can get it going. I hope they get it going. I feel awful for that fan base. And it just, again, it all comes down to the quarterback position.
Yeah, I'm with Nels. I agree. I think next year is a huge year for Trevor Lawrence because a lot of people and probably Clemson fans would say, oh, we know what Trevor Lawrence can do. We've seen him do it. We saw Tua Tagovailoa do what he did in college. He had probably 2 or 3 NFL wide receivers on that team. Trevor Lawrence had a ton of help on that Clemson team. So what can he really do in the NFL? Is he just a great college quarterback or is he built for the NFL? I think next year's when we find that out. I don't think that question is fully answered yet. I thought it was coming in this season. I thought for sure Trevor Lawrence was the number 1 pick in the NFL draft and deserved it. And I thought he was going to come in and at least play well, and he struggled this year. So I think next year we really find out who Trevor Lawrence is and what he can really do, because we've seen Tua Tagovailoa's game pretty much pivot on a 180. He was a guy that took a lot of deep shots in college, had a lot of deep ball accuracy, and now in the NFL, he's dip and dunk type of guy. You know, he's throwing a lot of checkdowns and short routes. So I think we find out what Trevor Lawrence is really capable of coming into next year. If he's able to right the ship and be an effective NFL quarterback, I think that sets the tone for the rest of his career. But if next year goes anything like this year, I think there's some questions to be raised about Trevor Lawrence.
All right, I found my graphic. So, I mean, just taking a look here at teams that did not have a good team, a good season, but a lot of offseason resources. I mean, yeah, again, Jacksonville really set up to, you know, maybe make something happen here. New York does have a lot of resources as well, but again, ownership is in question. Daniel Jones is in question. There's a lot happening with the Giants that could really probably turn you off. But there's only a handful of teams here that were above 500, but then also have a good amount of offseason resources. I'm looking at the top 2 teams in this guy's chart here. Cincinnati and the Los Angeles Chargers. Those are both 2 teams. Obviously, Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow are the stories there. 2 young teams, 2 young quarterbacks. They seem primed for, you know, a big rise here in the coming years, especially in the AFC. Hopefully we see them 4 years to come. That's such a fascinating ideal to me, that both those fan bases have their guy, and, you know, they both had incredible sophomore seasons. I mean, Joe Burrow is in talks for, you know, getting some MVP votes. I mean, my God, especially after that terrible injury he had. So, you know, I think it's fascinating. Obviously, another crazy year of NFL head coaching carousel. We're going to take a break here, and when we come back, you know, Ryan's going to walk us through all of the NFL playoff talk. So a lot of football today. I hope you guys stick with us. Once again, the number to text in your thoughts, 540-216-2231. Do that, or hit us up in the YouTube live chat.
Hello and welcome to John Paul Jones Arena, where today the Commonwealth Clash is renewed in Charlottesville as the Virginia Tech Hokies travel on up to take on the Virginia Cavaliers. Murphy driving inside, kicks out to Couture on the far corner, fires up, and good! The first three-pointer of the night belongs to Hunter Couture, and he gives Virginia Tech its largest lead of the night, 7-4 with 15 minutes remaining in the first half. Green, Murphy dribbles inside, kicks on out, but again turned over. It's Gardner in the open court, drives inside, denied by Keve Aluma. Hunter Couture bringing the ball down the court for Virginia Tech. He's sneaking three, he's got it! The Hokies are on a 7-0 run, its best run of the night. It's Beekman now over to Clark on the far elbow. Clark picks up the dribble, back over to Beekman, who's thinking about driving inside. Beekman swings over to Clark. He's got Storm Murphy on. Clark thinks triple and gets it to go. Kihei Clark buries his first field goal of the night. It's a three-point shot, and Virginia once again has a lead of 4. It's 24-20 for Virginia Cavaliers.
Keve Aluma, top of the key, swings it out. Storm Murphy brings it back out. 17 seconds on the shot clock. Murphy down low to Keve Aluma. Aluma down low, puts it up for 2. Yes, and the foul. Count it for Keve Aluma. 22, and Maroon will have a chance to tie it up with 14:29 remaining. 3:25 remaining. Keve Aluma on the right wing. Back out to Hunter Couture, who dribbles it down low. Back to Aluma, 10 seconds on the shot clock. Aluma working on Cafaro. Tries to put it in and is successful. Off the glass and in for 2. Keve Aluma gives Virginia Tech a 4-point lead with 3:10 remaining. Back out to Reese Beekman with 10 seconds on the shot clock. Jaden Gardner now pump fakes, drives down low, dishes off to Cafaro, who puts it in off the glass for 2. Cavaliers within 1, 2:20 remaining. 9 seconds remaining. Keve Aluma hands it off to Hunter Couture, rises and fires for 3. Would have given Tech the lead, no. Rebound, Murphy, pump fakes, puts it up for the win, no, and Virginia wins it. Virginia wins it 54-52. Tech had 2 opportunities to win the game from distance, and the Cavaliers are victorious in Charlottesville.
All right, you just heard Carter Hill and Andy Losi on the call from last night's Virginia Tech loss to Virginia on the road. All right, so basically for the last 20-something minutes of this show, Ryan, you got the floor, man. You're going to walk us through all the NFL playoff matchups. Big super wild card weekend. I know that they're going to be branding that as super wild card weekend, but at some point this is just going to become the norm, having 14 teams in the playoffs. And they're going to have to get rid of the super at some point, just to, not try to market it. All right, Ryan, what do you got for us? Where do you want to start out here?
There's a ton of games this week, and obviously a ton of exciting ones. Couple duds near the end, but we've got some good ones to talk about. First one I want to talk about, Sunday at 4:30. Maybe the most popular upset pick is the 49ers and the Cowboys. Dallas currently sits at a 3-point line, 3-point favorite. But this seems to be the popular upset pick. A lot of, obviously a lot of analysts and a lot of media like to, pick against the Cowboys. But is this really a game that the 49ers can take?
Man, Ryan, no doubt. I think I want to avoid just going full Dallas Cowboys fan and being like, oh, they always do this, because I like to treat each team each year differently. I don't like the whole, oh, it's the Dallas Cowboys, so they're going to lose in the playoffs thing. But when you look at this from a football perspective, Dallas can definitely get in their own way. I know that we're seeing a lot of their stats on offense and talking about how they were, first in points and first in yards. But I really look at, when you look at the NFC East sandwich they made, where they dropped a 50-burger on Washington and then they dropped another 50-burger on Philadelphia. Sandwiched in between that is a loss to Arizona, a team that they avoided playing again, and they only scored 22 points. And, Greg Zuerlein is... You can't let this game become a game where Greg Zuerlein is kicking multiple field goals. And also, I think you have to try to avoid, giving the ball to Ezekiel Elliott too much. I really think this is a game where you're going to have to rely on play action, and in order to have success against San Francisco's defense and not give in to the offense struggles we've seen Dallas have. Other than that, on the other side of things, San Francisco has a good offensive attack with versatile players. Deebo Samuel had an incredible season. George Kittle is back and healthy. They're getting Trent Williams back. I want to see what kind of Jimmy Garoppolo we're going to get. But and then on their defensive side, you can attack their secondary, but if you let Nick Bosa get in the backfield and hit Dak too much, it could be a long game. So this is going to be a really close game. I think the line is honestly in a pretty good spot, but the 49ers, they're very hot right now, and yes, I can see why it's a popular upset pick. It's definitely probably the most intriguing matchup of the season, and what I'm the playoffs so far in the first round. And what I'm interested in, what you guys are going to say, will you be watching this game on Nickelodeon?
Well, I just have to say one thing before we touch up on the Nickelodeon simulcast, and then predict who the MVP will be. It all depends on who comes out of the tunnel. I mean, the Cowboys can come out of the tunnel. They can be the team that walloped the Eagles and the Washington football team. Or they could be the team that came out of the tunnel against the Cardinals or the Chiefs, 2 very embarrassing losses. Same goes to the 49ers. They can be the team that came out of the tunnel and defeated the Rams in a very thrilling game. Or they can be the team that lost to the Colts earlier this year alongside of the Packers. I mean, obviously the 49ers are right in the hot hand, but it all, like I said, it all just depends on who comes out and who wants to win them more. But I most likely will be watching this on Nickelodeon, actually. I thought that their coverage of the Bears-Saints game last season was so bad it was good. And then as well as Mitchell Trubisky being the one and only so far Nickelodeon Most Valuable Player, the MVP. It's going to be very interesting to see who gets that award this year. I think it'll be a lot of fun. I think the NFL has obviously doesn't really need that much marketing to grow their game. But hey, I mean, you get the fans in early. It's just a fun simulcast to watch if you're in the mood for some slime in the end zone and SpongeBob and Patrick hanging off the field goal post. I don't really know if they're going to up their game from next year or last year, or not. But I most definitely will be tuning in to see the MVP award.
Yeah, for me, this is a Cowboys team that obviously had a great season, but in between, there's a couple games there that were just offensive anomalies. They came out of nowhere, seemingly. Most noticeably, the game against the Denver Broncos. The Cowboys just, you're waiting for them to get something going, and then they just didn't do it. They never did in that game. Arizona, obviously, that's to me the worst the Cowboys have played all year, other than that Broncos game, and they're still in position to win it near the end of the game. A very controversial call near the end there with that fumble led to that, but the Cowboys still had a chance to win that game. So I think if they get past the 49ers, this might be one of the toughest tests in the playoffs for them. I mean, 49ers winners of 7 of their last 9, one of the hottest teams in the NFL. So this is obviously a game that is a popular upset pick, but if the Cowboys are able to get past this and get their offense rolling, I think they're one of the biggest teams to watch out for in the rest of the playoffs. But let's move forward. Patriots and Bills. Saturday at 8:15, maybe again, but another one of these really intriguing matchups. Buffalo currently sits at -4 as a 4-point favorite. The season series split at 1. One of the games was, if you guys remember, pretty much a blizzard. Both teams, it was basically which team had the better rushing attack, and that night it was certainly the Patriots. But Buffalo responded and evened it up at 1 later in the season. Who moves on in this game and why?
I'm going to be honest with you. I like New England. I don't think we're seeing snow, but this game is going to be cold. I mean, I'm just looking at the weather right now. It's currently sitting at 5 degrees for Saturday night. I'm looking here. I'm pulling up AccuWeather right now. That's what I'm doing. That's what you have to do, I think, for this game. Yeah, I'm not seeing snow in the forecast, but it's just going to be really cold, and I think that means simply that Josh Allen is going to be able to throw the football. Now they did get a pretty decent rushing attack from Devin Singletary in the latter part of the season. But I don't know, man. I mean, just Bill in the playoffs had a really good game plan for the last time they played in Buffalo. Obviously, cold weather, being a big factor in the game. Definitely hammer the under, but I could without a doubt see New England coming out on top here. It all comes down to Mac Jones. He did not play as strongly as he had, to end the season. But if they're able to lean on that run game again, I think New England can come out of here.
Yeah, Mac Jones not really looking too hot against the Dolphins. Kind of kind of pulled back the layer and a lot of the hype and the hope that a lot of the Patriots fans have, and kind of was a reality check. That's what I was looking for. That he's still a rookie. I mean, he's still a rookie quarterback. Has he blown all the expectations and all of the stats set that everyone thought he was going to be out of the water this season? Absolutely. He's done a wonderful job in New England, and I think that he fits Bill Belichick's role really well. But this is his first ever playoff game in his first year. Like you said, the weather's going to be pretty cold, so they're most likely going to rely on the run game. And the run game can only get you so far, although it did against the Bills last time in December. And the Bills have game plan around this, and they're looking for blood. So it's going to be a very interesting game, and I can see both teams coming out on top. But what this all comes down to is Josh Allen. Are we going to see the scrambling, somehow turning a negative 2-yard play into 20, Josh Allen? Or are we going to see the roll out right, roll out left, throw the ball away, Josh Allen? I think that's what this comes down to, and it's going to be a very methodical, very who game plan better game. But I'm going with the Bills on this one, actually.
Yeah, I honestly like the Bills too. But again, like Nell said, it relies on which Josh Allen comes to play. And can they get that passing game going? I know there's no snow, but it is, again, going to be 5 degrees, and there's likely going to be a bit of wind chill. So the real temperature might be below zero when this game kicks off. I'm not sure how much that affects the game plan because these are two teams that are used to playing in the cold. So I think that Buffalo will still be able to get that passing game going. And if they do, I think they do hold the edge over the Patriots, even though the Patriots have a solid defense. I think it really comes down to which Josh Allen shows up. But moving on, Monday night, all alone by themselves, Cardinals and Rams. I think this is probably the most exciting matchup. I think it'll have the most fireworks. The Rams currently sit at a 4-point favorite. I think the biggest question coming in this one, will Matt Stafford be able to get over this turnover bug in order to give the Rams a win?
Ryan, this is such a, weird matchup both sides because on one hand, I'm looking at Matt Stafford, who just does not have any playoff success. And yes, I know he plays for the Lions, but still, there were games in the playoffs that were definitely his fault. And then you look at Arizona, and with Cliff Kingsbury, since he's been there, they haven't had a lot of late season success. So the fact that they finally gotten into the postseason with him, it's so weird because Arizona was on such a hot start, and then they just did that second half of the season where they were average. So these are two teams that are coming in with not a lot of steam, and I really don't know which direction to take this game. I mean, the Rams are at home, and they did split the season series, and I mean, first time they played, Arizona just blew them out, and then I think the second time, Rams kind of gave it to them a little bit. So I don't know. I think physicality-wise, I think we can see Arizona win. I think Aaron Donald can, just continue to be that force that he's always been his entire career. But again, like you said, Matt Stafford being a turnover, freak. I'm interested to see how Kyler performs in the playoffs. There are rumors that DeAndre Hopkins might play, but I'm not holding out hope for that. Even if he does, he's not going to be 100%. I don't know which way I want to go with this game. I think I want to go Arizona just because I don't know, man. I'm really high on some of their playmakers, but even still, Sean McVay has shown some level of success in the playoffs. I mean, he made it to a Super Bowl, for crying out loud. If Matt Stafford can not mess it up, I think they can win in spite of them, like they have been. But I think Arizona just has too many playmakers all over the field.
Yeah, I mean, what I want to touch up on before I talk about the game is the fact that there's 3 games this weekend where it's an absolute toss-up, and I think that's really great. And I'm very happy that the NFL playoffs have come down to this. But Matthew Stafford, when he was in the Lions, I was very happy that he was able to leave Detroit. Not just because I'm a Packers fan, but because I think that Matthew Stafford is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. Unfortunately, he hasn't really shown that, and he hasn't really shown his true colors in the past couple of games. But if I'm the Arizona Cardinals right now, and I'm their ownership, and I'm their front office, and you lose this game, I think that it is time to start questioning whether or not Cliff Kingsbury's got to go. This is now 2 straight seasons where in the latter half of the season, he has not really produced that well, and they've kind of slid, and they kind of stumbled their way into the playoffs this year. Sean McVay is, in my opinion, a much better coach than Cliff Kingsbury. Like you mentioned, Dan, he made the Super Bowl. And if you look at his coaching tree and all of his proteges that have come before him, such as Zach Taylor and Matt LaFleur in Cincinnati and Green Bay, it just goes to show just how great of a head coach he is. But like he said as well, neither of these teams are really on a hot streak right now. They're kind of cold. And I think that the Rams are kind of coming in with a chip on their shoulder after that tough loss to the 49ers. And that's what I think that will propel them over the Cardinals. Although this game is really a toss-up. It just depends on who wants it more, and just who comes out offensively on that side of the ball better.
Yeah, I'm going to put a conditional pick on the Rams. That condition being, if Matt Stafford does not turn the ball over like he has been, I like the Rams from a pure talent perspective. Honestly, I expect a big game out of Odell Beckham Jr. If they're able to get him the football in the open field, I think he's eager to prove himself in the playoffs. So I think he will be able to do that against this Cardinals defense. But yeah, I like the Rams in this one. I think it'll be a close one. I think it's going to come down to the last couple minutes. This is obviously probably the heavyweight matchup that we're going to see this weekend, Monday night. Again, 8:15 p.m. The Cardinals and the Rams will face off. Let's move forward to the Raiders and Bengals Saturday at 4:30. An interesting matchup. Cincinnati currently sits at a 5-point favorite, and the Raiders have, been one of these teams that have came out on. We've seen teams like the Ravens have bad luck in games that are really tight. Maybe a field goal to a touchdown game. The Raiders have had that opposite side of luck. They've been able to come out on top in those matchups. They've had a lot of late game heroics. Does this continue, or does a road end here for the Raiders?
I think the road's got to end here. I mean, if you just look at their last game against the Chargers, that game literally came down to the final seconds. And I think everyone in America thought there's no way this ends in a tie before the game started. And then at the end, they were like, oh, wow, this is going to tie, which I honestly hoped it would have. But for all of the troubles and tribulations that the Raiders have overcome, you mentioned earlier in the show, John Gruden leaving and the Henry Ruggs incident, as well as some other personal stuff that happened in the Raiders within their play organization. It's been a really miracle-like season, and it's been a very, very it's been a good season for the Raiders. But I think that this ends here with the Bengals. The Bengals are out for blood. Cincinnati hasn't made the playoffs in a long time, since the Andy Dalton days. But I think that unfortunately the road ends here for the Raiders. In my opinion, this is one of the easiest games to look at. Although the Raiders have a very stout defense, I think Chase and Burrow are just going to light it up against the Raiders. And unfortunately, I think this is going to be one of the only games, along with the Eagles-Buccaneers game and the Steelers-Chiefs, that just ends in an absolute blowout. I think the Bengals understand that the Raiders are kind of riding on this wave of, oh, wow, we've overcome so much adversity. And they just want to stop that. And they just want to put out that fire before it starts. And they're going to come out early and just shut them down quickly.
I mean, we got to remember these guys have already played this year. It was a while ago. I don't think we need to take it too much into consideration. But when they did play, Cincy took them to town, 32-13. Burrow didn't have his flashiest game. He only threw for like 140-something yards. It wasn't that great, but that was the Joe Mixon game. So overall, I don't know if that same performance happens, but the Cincinnati defense, which I think is a little bit underrated, when I watch them play, they play pretty well, and they get to the quarterback. They can force some turnovers. They didn't really, contain Darren Waller that much, but they kept him out of the end zone. They held Hunter Renfrow, who really exploded this season, had a career year, definitely. But I mean, they limited Derek Carr to only 19-27, so it wasn't a good day for the Raiders offense at all, and they picked them off as well once. So I really can see a repeat of that happening, and I think that Cincinnati just has some high-flying moments. I think they do better, honestly, with their receivers. Less of a Joe Mixon game, even though I could still see him finding the end zone a couple times. I think Cincinnati can roll here, especially at home compared to when they played them earlier. They were on the road.
Yeah, I like Cincinnati too, but you got to remember, I think the Chargers, were a team with a lot more firepower coming into that matchup, and I think I expected them to win and win fairly easily in that game. But the Raiders came out, punched them in the mouth, and albeit it came down to the last few minutes or in overtime, but nonetheless, the Raiders were able to come out on top. So I think they're able to combat a little bit of that firepower. I think their pass rush will continue to be really, really solid with Max Crosby coming off the edge there. He had a monstrous game against the Chargers, and I think that some of that success continues. And I don't think it will necessarily be a blowout. I think the Bengals come out on top by 7 to 10 points at the end of the day, but I think it still creates for a semi-interesting matchup. Again, this is near the bottom half of some of our, on our level of interest. But I do think this is an intriguing matchup. And I think the Raiders, if they do get past the Bengals, are they a team that maybe you're like, okay, these guys are playing with confidence. They know what they've overcome maybe the most adverse season that could have possibly happened. And now they're playing with a chip on their shoulder. So I don't know if the Raiders get past this game, what could they do? I think that's something to watch out for. But moving on to the last couple games here, we've got a couple. I wouldn't say duds. There's still a possibility for upsets. There always is. We've seen a lot of parity in the NFL, but again, this is the playoffs, so we might see a little less of that. But the Eagles and Buccaneers, Tampa Bay sits at I feel like a generous 8.5-point favorite. I think it maybe should be a little bit more. Sunday at 1 p.m. These two teams face off. It looks like this is the Bucs game to lose, to be honest. I mean, this is just they played earlier in the season. It was a tight game, but again, this is the playoffs. How much of a fight did the Eagles really put up in this one?
I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't know, and I don't think it's much. I mean, just looking at, I know that they were playing a lot of their backups. Jalen Hurts didn't play against Dallas, but seeing them get out physicaled and just out dueled for all that time, I really don't know what I can expect from them going up against Tampa Bay, who has a better, more physical defensive unit. I mean, you look back to the game last season in the playoffs. I mean, I know Tampa Bay was on the road at Washington, but that game was relatively tight. I think it was tighter than a lot of people expected it to be. So I mean, it's the playoffs. We can see some stuff happen, but it's Jalen Hurts' first time around. Maybe they keep it close in the first half, maybe in the first couple quarters, but by the time fourth quarter rolls around, I think Tom Brady, just his experience and just the overall talent on that Tampa Bay side, it can definitely help them out. I'm interested to see if Leonard Fournette is back, or if he was just IR'd for the regular season, and if he's just done for the playoffs. I know Chris Godwin's out, but seeing how the Bucs, handle their injuries on offense, seeing how they perform in their first playoff game against, the Eagles have good pieces in that secondary, especially. I mean, Darius Slay is still playing at an all-pro level. So yeah, I think it could be a little bit closer, but at the end of the day, I think the Bucs pull this one out and win comfortably around the fourth quarter.
I feel like everybody in Philadelphia right now is just kind of shocked, just kind of reeling it in, the fact that they made it this far. Going into the season, I don't think anybody expected the Eagles to really put up this much of a fight and actually make the playoffs. Yes, there are some people that predicted it, but even then, the majority of everyone who's predicting it thought the Eagles were not going to be atop the NFC East this year and make the playoffs. I'm sorry, they weren't atop the NFC East, just in the mix of the NFC East. And there's nothing scarier than a Philly team that does that, because the last time that Philly was relatively viewed as the underdog was when they made the Super Bowl and they beat the Patriots and they beat Tom Brady. So I think that the Eagles come out with a little bit of a fire under their team, but just the might and the experience that Tom Brady has over Hurts will propel the Buccaneers easily over the Eagles, although it will be a good game to start out with in the first half.
So we're pushing up against the time here, but I do want to touch real quickly. Steelers and Chiefs, Sunday, 8:15. Kansas City sits at a 12.5-point favorite. And I think this one's pretty easy, guys. I think we'll all agree. I think the Chiefs will take care of business. Big Ben. I don't think we'll go out with another win here.
Yeah, I said earlier that the Cardinals kind of stumbled their way into the playoffs, but this is it. The Steelers are literally the team that somehow accidentally walked into the wrong door and boom, they're in the playoffs. The Chiefs demolished the Steelers the last time they played. It wasn't anything but a fight, and I think this is unfortunately how Big Ben's career is going to end. The 12.5 line just really goes to show just like what everyone feels about this game, and I don't unfortunately think that this is going to be a sad whimper to Big Ben's career.
I'm in total agreement. I think that Kansas City can roll in this game, and I mean, you look at their last game of the season against Baltimore, and we can see Pittsburgh's offensive struggles. I am interested to see how their defense plays, and T.J. Watt had a historic season, probably going to be your defensive player of the year. So we'll see how they can contain them, and maybe like the Chiefs of the first half of the season come out, and it looks like it could be a close game. But at the end of the day, I think the Chiefs blow them out. All right. Yeah, like Ryan said, we are up against it, so we want to thank you guys once again for listening in on our second test stream. Next week, just keeping you guys updated. We don't have an official time yet for our semester shows, but next week, be sure to catch our live stream for promotion. Colburn Bergstrom is going to be joining me as I will partake in the Hot Ones Challenge as punishment for losing the picks during my time on the 3304 Sports Podcast. So very looking forward to that, and hopefully you guys can get an enjoyment out of me causing myself pain. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. Have a great rest of your day, and take care.